Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Rauch, and welcome to episode 3 of Channel Focus's DEI Tell Us Your Story. So, for those of you that joined us for the first two, we had Michael McCullough talking about his story and overcoming adversity and the various challenges as he rose in his channel chief career. We followed that up with Megan Sullivan from SAP. A very, very different path, very different challenges. But the response on both of these episodes has been outstanding, and we appreciate your feedback. So, speaking of feedback, we have a comments field in the LinkedIn Live. So right now, it would be a little bit of fun to be able to type in whatever you'd like to type in. We would love to hear where you're tuning in from and maybe who is joining us. And then obviously, as we go through the next 30 minutes, we'd love to hear your comments and really any questions you want to raise to me or the guest that I'm about to introduce. I just wanted to also take a minute to remind you why we're doing this. DEI is important. It's very important to the channel. We think we have a very unique forum here to be able to kind of put it in context. Because I think everybody is talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but sometimes the context of being able to put it into the career that we've chosen is important. Sometimes it's important to be able to personalize a story. And the story today is really centered around a gentleman that I had the opportunity to meet over the last year and a half, Balaji Subramanian. Now, Balaji is the channel chief, worldwide SVP for iGel. And he has a very, very different story, very different obstacles. So let me take this opportunity to be able to welcome Balaji.
Hey, Frank.
All right, buddy. You started to worry me. You looked a little frozen on that screen for a minute.
Okay. Hopefully, I'm okay now and unfrozen. But
You're moving. Well. You either are. Or you're moving very deliberately.
Okay. Good morning to you.
Good morning. So we have a bunch of people tuning in. I see some private chats that are coming in from Las Vegas, California. Basically, we have a couple of people that are staying up a little bit late in London that have also tuned in. So people are very interested in hearing your story.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm flattered and humbled to have sort of a global audience. This is great.
Yeah. So why don't we start out a little bit about your background, and obviously we're going to get into how you got into the channel, but maybe a little bit even before that, something personal about you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important, especially with with the title of this particular webinar and our focus on DE&I. A little bit about me is, my family is an immigrant family. My father came here to the U.S. from India on a Fulbright fellowship, and so that was our first journey over here to the U.S. And of course, that along with that comes the different experiences that we all go through. I actually grew up in a very small university town in the eastern side of Washington State called Pullman. And I don't know if anyone knows about Pullman, but it's surrounded by these what we call the Palouse Hills, where a lot of agriculture is, and a lot of wheat is grown there, or a lot of lentils are grown there. So as I grew up there, elementary school, junior high, high school, I actually ended up doing my bachelor's and master's there at Washington State University also. But when I grew up there, many of my friends still are farmers there. So a very different experience than the Bay Area where I live now in Silicon Valley, right? Talking about diversity, right? My brother and I were the only students of color growing up in Pullman, right? So it was a very different experience for me, but not a bad experience, It was a good experience. Love Pullman, love going back there. It's still home for me. But there's many things there that I learned as a small town kid and coming up here to Silicon Valley. So that's sort of my a little bit about my background growing up there.
That's fascinating. It really is. So you, I don't know where you grew up in India or where you were from in India, but having been to Bangalore, having been to Mumbai, the density, the pure density of India, and the commonality of India in some of those cities, and then all of a sudden you're put into rural Washington. What did you learn? How did that shape you?
Yeah, well, I've never really lived in India. I came here. I was born there, but I came here when I was 3 years old. So
Okay.
never lived there. So I can only make that comparison now as an adult. But growing up in Pullman, warm environment, but it was different. And I can tell you, for example, a few things. One is, well, my name, right? So Balaji Subramanian is not a very common name, especially in Pullman, Washington. And so that certainly set me apart, and something that certainly, when viewed upon and looked upon at the first time, people would immediately think and have a different perceptions of who is this kid or who is this guy with that type of name, right? Obviously, my color, as I mentioned, by the way, I was an athlete, and I played a lot of sports growing up. And in all the sports, for example, I was sectionally ranked and played a lot of tennis tournaments in the Northwest and all that, and going to these very sometimes elite tennis clubs. I did stand out, that's for sure, right? I ended up being the only kid in color there, and so it was different there. But again, I never noticed any harsh differences sort of attached to me, or any different biases. But it was different, I must say. So
No, no, it really is great to hear, because obviously you took that winning attitude. Whether it's tennis, I was more of a baseball and a football guy,
mm.
but probably if I would have taken up tennis, I would have saved a few broken bones along the way. so, so it's interesting. Your father obviously was an academic. How did you how did you how did you pick up your interest for business, and kind of take us along that path a little bit?
Right. It's interesting. That's a great question. I actually, when I wanted to start out with, I actually started out saying I want to be an archaeologist. I want to go into anthropology. And now as an adult, thinking back upon it, I always wonder, like, why. And I love history. I learned from history. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm curious, and I think those are some of the things that attracted me to sort of being an archaeologist or anthropologist.
Mm.
Sort of look back and learn upon history. But as I got into that, I realized that I also wanted to make sure that I was able to earn a good income. And frankly, being an archaeologist and anthropologist, I wasn't sure, right? And the other part of me is I am quantitative, right? And so I love numbers. I'm comfortable with numbers, and sort of using my critical thinking that I seem to have to be able to use that to my advantage. And that's sort of what led me to finance. I got my bachelor's degree in finance and master's in economics, and I still remember Dr. Carolyn Clark. She taught macroeconomics, and that's what attracted me to finance and economics. She was an excellent teacher, and I loved how she taught, and what I learned from that class. And that's really what led me to sort of getting my degrees in finance, and then going on to getting my degree in international economics from that standpoint. So that's really kind of where it came down to.
That's cool. Finance, finance and economics. When I was talking to Michael, we were talking about Nolan Ryan. When I was talking to Megan, basically everybody finds their own way. Everybody finds their own path. Let's go back to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So here you are, and now you're very, very good with numbers. You're basically an athlete growing up, and how did you fit in? When did you start to find the commonality? And if you didn't find a commonality with your peers, how did you overcome some of that?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great question. When I first started working, by the way, moving down here from the Bay Area to the Bay Area was huge for me, because growing up in a very small part of the world in Pullman, Washington, and then moving down to the big Bay Area with freeways and highways and all this kind of stuff was a big change for me. So that itself was a big change. And then starting to work was a big change because all my jobs, I didn't have, a summer internship at a consulting firm, anything like that. I mowed lawns and painted houses and worked in the grounds crew, right? So I had zero business experience growing down here. And so I had to learn a lot. I was very green behind the ears, as one of my first managers told me, and I had a lot to learn, right? And so I sort of just jumped in. And so in my first companies that I worked in, I had zero inkling on technology. So I took actually classes at Foothill College here, for example, around semiconductor physics, right? I took classes around networking and things like that. So I could be a much more eloquent business partner with my stakeholders at the companies that I worked with, Cisco or Adobe or wherever I worked with, right? And just so I could be, again, truly sit across the table from them, understand the technology, the product, the sales go-to-market strategy, and then add value from either a finance standpoint or what are other roles that I've had over the years from that standpoint too. So I think that's some advice that I would get to people is, there'll always be obstacles, and just be curious, keep learning, and just jump in there.
Okay, well, we're gonna continue this story because it's fascinating to me, it really is. So you were mowing lawns, you were painting houses. I was moving furniture and I was cleaning parking lots.
Right.
So humble beginnings are pretty cool.
Right.
So we have Michael McCullough who's weighed in and has termed you Indiana Jones, probably for the interest in archaeology and anthropology. And our good friend Meg Brennan is talking about how fortunate we are to have you sharing your story. So let's move on, and we have a couple of questions from the audience. We'll get to them. But here you are, smart guy, obviously, good with numbers. You're cruising around. You're walking the halls of Cisco, Adobe, and you're a finance guy. So how do you transition into that sales role and even into that channel role? Because that's a big leap.
Yeah, it somewhat was, right, and it was scary too, right? And again, I was fortunate to have a particular manager, in this case, a mentor, who observed my questions and my interest in more than just a finance type of job, right? And my interest in sort of the whole go-to-market strategy and how the company works and how we do things and things like that. And one of his most important lessons to me and advice to me was, Balaji, don't just focus on the depth of your experience, but focus on the breadth of your experience. And you want to be, that's how you become much more valuable to any organization. And so he said, he said, if you go and get experience in marketing, in sales, and product or whatever else, you just become more and more valuable to any company that you're going to be with. And you won't get laid off as easy. So do that, right? And so it resonated with me, and it certainly clicked in my head. And so that's what I started to, have these informational one-on-ones with people around the company, and asked if I could go on to other roles that sort of used my transferable skill sets that I had. And many of us do. People forget that you have many transferable skill sets that you have that you don't realize. And you can kind of take that and bridge it to, for example, going from finance, I went into sales strategy and operations, right? Because I'd been a sales controller, I was very much used to doing forecasting, commit calls, operational kinds of stuff and things like that. So it wasn't as hard going to sales strategy and sales ops and then continuing after that as well. So that's another lesson that I learned and things that I always share with people.
So that's interesting. So I think you went from giving quotas to getting a quota. I love that. I love that transition. So obviously, having grown up as kind of a contemporary in those times, it was a pretty white, male-dominated environment. In Cisco. And other companies for that matter. So, how did you fit in? Did you ever, Lucy Jones asked a great question online. She's asking, what are the most serious DEI challenges you encountered climbing that ladder, and
Mhm.
how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a couple of observations on sort of your question and Lucy's question as well. Um, I consider myself introverted, and so sitting across the table from a few friends and all that, I'm animated. But in larger settings, I'm actually quieter, and so I had to overcome that also. That was a feedback that was given to me, especially in a culture as the Cisco's, where I would deem them to be, at least when I was there, a passive aggressive culture. And so it was something that I had to learn and overcome to sort of have any success in that environment, was to be not more obnoxiously louder, but much more participatory in many settings that I was
Mhm.
frankly scared about, right? And afraid of opening my voice. And then luckily colleagues and managers and all that continue to encourage me to be much more vocal in meetings, because I grew up in small farming town, so I am polite, I'm respectful, I'm quiet, and I realized that I had to be much more than that. So that was something that I faced, and I would classify that in terms of the I in DE and I. So that
Mhm.
inclusiveness was sort of an obstacle for me to some extent, right? Because of that, because of my own personality, because of the culture of the company. I didn't feel that it had anything to do with the color of my skin, but it certainly and this is true. You guys need to understand this also. Asians, I was raised very strongly to be super respectful of elders, super respectful of people of authority, because of elders are authority figures too, right? And so that was ingrained into me. And so coming into a workforce without any other previous type of work experience, that it took me a while to really get over that. And I still think that I haven't gotten over it as much. I'm still
Mhm.
probably a little bit more quieter than my peers and colleagues because of that. So that inclusiveness became quite an obstacle, and I've worked on it for many years now. Yeah.
No, it's it's interesting because some of the takeaways that I've heard so far. I like the breadth of skills. You're really taking an inventory of what you learned along the way.
Hmm.
Never stop learning, being a lifetime learner,
Hmm.
and it basically maybe not trying to be like everybody else, but trying to be able to use your unique attributes
Hmm.
to be able to fit in
Right.
and to be able to be included.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
All
Yeah.
right. So let's talk about the big step. So here you are. You're obviously doing well. You've gotten into sales. You've taken all your analytics and everything else, and your love for numbers, and you're crushing it. How do you jump into channels? And how did you get to IGEL?
Yeah. Great question again. It kind of just came by chance almost, right? I was at Adobe, and I was running business planning ops for emerging markets there. And these were countries like India and China, Latin America, Eastern Europe. And, as you guys, many of for all of those countries, it's pretty much partner driven. And so I was starting to get to know a lot more partners and putting together special, different type of pricing and go to market strategies for those countries. And one day, my SVP of sales at Adobe came to me and my manager and said, there are so many different partner programs around the world in different geographies for us, but I just don't know what type of channel strategy we have and partner programs we have. We need one global partner strategy and program. Can you guys jump into this? And that's what led me to then become sort of that global channel strategy and ops person for Adobe, and had was grateful, looking back upon it. Adobe, I loved Adobe, and be able to create what we call the Adobe Partner Connection Program with a lot of my teammates and peers around the world, and launch that across the world in a phased manner, and met many, 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 many partners around the world. And the best thing about that is we were still a perpetual company at that time. And then 2 years later, we became a subscription company. And so we had to sort of relaunch that whole program and redo it. And so I gained a lot of experience in that, working with partners, working with sales, working with marketing, working with IT people, and of course, partners. And so that's what led me to it. And that's when I found out this is sort of the sweet spot for me. It really is a great position for me because I can use my finance background. I can use my sales experience background. I can use my process quantitative type of skill sets and the way my brain works also. And I can be a true advocate for my partners, right, worldwide, externally, but also internally, be that glue, be that hub back internally to make sure that we're all aligned from a partner channel go-to-market strategy standpoint. So that's when I started to say, this is my sort of where I belong. I think I love this, right? This is where I belong. And that's what led me down this path of continuing to be sort of a channel advocate in my next few companies, Informatica, ServiceMax, and now at iJump, where I'm the channel chief.
So again, fascinating, because not only did you collect a breadth of skills, not only did you inventory them, but you found a way to make them transferable. And you made them transferable in a very meaningful way. I remember, just watching Adobe, as everybody was watching Adobe while you were doing what you were doing, because it was really one of the first companies that went student body right to be able to shift and accelerate that shift to subscription. So that's a great challenge. Well, we have a very interested audience, and we have some great questions coming in. So the first question that's coming in is, okay, so now you're Balaji, the individual contributor, and then you become the leader. How was that transition from being a very successful individual contributor into leadership? And what obstacles did you overcome?
Yeah, great question. And probably everyone goes through this journey in some form or fashion. I certainly sort of leaned on my experience of sports, actually. So growing up playing a lot of sports, I was the captain of my tennis team, captain of many teams, and led, sort of the team from that standpoint. And so I kind of went back to those kind of days as to how did I motivate my teammates? How do I, instill discipline, frankly? How was I stern? When was I stern? Was I not stern? Those kinds of things. And then along the way, actually, I had kids, right? And as many parents know, I have a son and a daughter, and their strengths sort of have been there from day one. They haven't really changed too much, right? They've learned a lot and they've grown and things like that. But their core strengths, day one to where they are now, hasn't changed. And so that's something I learned over the years also. And as I became a manager of people, a leader of teams, etc., I started focusing more on strengths of people and how do I make sure that I hire people who are much smarter than me, first of all, and second of all, have strengths that complement me, right? And so that's became something that I learned too. Well, I had to learn this kind of stuff. I made mistakes along the way, I'm sure, and things like that. But that's kind of what I focus on: the strengths of people and how they complement you. That's how you become a much stronger team. And I kind of hold to that. So I hire people who are curious. One of my favorite questions during interviews is like, and I always say, no right or wrong answers, but what's your favorite movie? It's amazing, what that one question leads to, because you have such great conversations after that, and you get to know each other better and get to know that person's viewpoints on many things and things like that. And likewise for me also. So that's a quick answer for you. Yeah.
That's good. So next time we're together, whether it's in Phoenix or wherever it might be, I'd love to hear about some of the favorite movies. I'm sure you've gotten some very diverse answers.
Yes.
So we have another question for the audience, which is something that I know is near and dear to my heart, and I believe is near and dear to your heart. So people help people. You help your children. You help the people that work for you, etc. Who helped you? Give me a quick story on maybe one person that mentored you, and maybe one person that you mentored.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think, again, I was very fortunate, and I still am very fortunate in terms of mentorship. And one advice I give to people also, which I learned again over the years, someone told me this. One of my colleagues, I think, actually told me this, and she said, "Make everyone your mentor," because I think we were having a discussion around mentors and all that, and she said, "Make everybody a mentor," right? And then the other thing that she added was, which I find just fascinating and absolutely true, is a lot of people that you don't like, actually you can learn a lot from. And ironically, they can be mentors for you too. And so
Mhm.
that's something I hold to heart also, and try to follow is that. So just because I kind of dislike someone, or I might be frightened of someone, or I'm sort of uncomfortable with someone, I try not to ignore them, because I feel that I can learn from them, and that's a sort of mentorship also.
Mhm.
But one of my favorite mentors was from way back when I first started working, Masood Jabbar, actually. And he's the one who said, "You're sort of green behind the ears. You need to learn a lot. And I'm going to help you, and I'm going to teach you a lot of things." And so he's the one who said, "Focus on the breadth of experience," and
Mhm.
sort of led me to be more comfortable with that. Am I a mentor to people? Yes. I stay in close contact with many of my team members from all my other companies. Here's one tip to you guys, and you'll see me do this roughly once a year or so. I go through every one of my LinkedIn contacts, and I write a quick note, usually at the beginning of the year, like now, or someplace during halfway through the year, and that allows me to stay in touch with anyone and everyone that I've had contact with, and they reach out to me after that. Many people, as soon as I say, I get about 10 people who reach out to me, say, "Okay, how did you change jobs?" That's one of my favorite questions. Like, what
Mhm.
led you? What's the courage that you had to move from Adobe to Informatica, or Informatica to iGel, etc. Right? And so I give them, hey, reasons like, well, my quantitative nature. Here's my
Mhm.
Excel spreadsheet. I put pros and cons, right? And that led me to a decision, right? Stuff like that. So it's good to be a mentor. Feels so good to be able to do that. So yes, I'm a mentor for many of my former teammates as friends as well.
Good deal. Love to get connectivity. I don't know, I know you're a pretty popular guy, so I have no idea how you have time to email everybody in your LinkedIn profile. But hey, we're almost at the bottom of the hour.
Uh-huh.
We all love DEI,
Mhm.
and we love it for different reasons. But the thing that I found interesting about you, when you and I talk together, and we talk together pretty frequently, is really your passion for it, but not only your passion for it, but putting it in action. So you actually did something that I never heard of before. You incorporated it into your partner program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll give you two examples, Frank, and the rest of the listeners there, is that I think you mentioned the key thing, to make it actionable, right? And as channel chiefs, we do have a platform that we can use with our partners. And so I have a partner advisory council meeting that we started out here in North America this past year. And, we have those 8 partners are sort of a proxy for my whole channel community. And so I introduced the idea of DE&I to them. And to my pleasant surprise, they were all very, very much interested in it. And so, you know, we have the opportunity to do, I think, 3 things. One is to educate, right? So I said, let me use this platform that I have to educate at least this proxy of partners. And then let's make it actionable also, right? And there are little things that we can do, right? With my partner advisory council, Harvard has a implicit bias test quizzes that you can take. I would
Mhm.
highly encourage all of you to go off and do that. I've taken it. There's like 30 of them. I've done about 6 of them, and it's fascinating to me, like what my implicit biases are just by taking that, right? So I
Mhm.
asked the pack to be able to do that also. But
Mhm.
your point, to make it more part of the program, more actionable, what we're doing this year, in fact, February 1st, as we release our new program, is that we will actually have diversity, equity, and inclusion as a menu item in our market development fund program. So now partners can look at that saying, I'd like to be able to get some MDF, not only for customer acquisition or partner enablement or deal acceleration, but they also have a DE&I menu item also to be able to pick from. And so we are now willing to be able to provide some funds to our partners to be able to, again, advance and the cause around D&I and make it actionable for everybody. And I think I'm really looking forward to see what type of results we get from that and what some cool things that we can do together from a partner community out there. So.
Well done. Extremely well done. And you know what? You speak from the heart. You're a man of character and it comes through. So thank you very, very much for spending the last 30 minutes with me. The comments from the audience have been extremely appreciative and extremely positive. Thank you very much. We're going to wrap it up. Looking forward to episode 4 next month. We're going to have another great guest, which will be announced in the next week or 2 weeks. But I think they're going to have a hard time beating you. So thank you, Balaji.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Bye-bye.